So I'm super excited to be here. I was hoping for some snow, but well, you know, that's life. When Zoltan asked me to write a description, I just took something I was thinking about a couple of months ago about lying to my doctor, which I do from time to time. We all lie from time to time. But before that, and so that you have an idea of who I am and what I've been up to, and in order to maybe help you understand and wake you up a bit about privacy and things like that, as Joshua said earlier on, I just joined the EDPS, European Data Protection Supervisor, to start thinking, together with a bunch of other people who are very smart and a lot smarter than I am, about data ethics. So for the last 3 years, I've been talking to a lot of lawyers, and well, the law is the law, and I'll talk a bit about the law, but basically what we're doing here, and what Jim was explaining as well, goes slightly beyond just legislation. And I think the European Union found that out, and is trying to better understand how we can find balance between economic opportunities, but also possibly some kind of economic, the lack of harm for people in society and things like that. So this was an article that was written this weekend about the ethics group. And so my first question for you guys is, who is this gentleman who talks about remote-controlled data cows? Anybody? Very good. So you win a prize. As I live in Spain, you get Spanish ham because we need to support our economy. Very good. So there's this article in The Guardian, if you want to take a look at it. I thought the idea of remote-controlled data cows is probably not the way we think about customer and prospects. But apparently, people in the European Parliament do think about it like that. And as I was looking at my husband's presentation, he was talking about reporting monkeys, and my job is to build bridges between two worlds. I just put 1 and 2 together, so it becomes monkey reporting on remote data-controlled cows. And what are we going to do about this? So, I'll get back to my presentation in just a while. But before that, I would like you to all stand up, because we've all listened to Jim, and we're going to play a little game, and we're going to have a prize at the end. And the game goes as follows. So you're all standing up. And the question is, are you willing to give and allow for storage for certain types of data? If you're fine with it, you stay standing. If you're not fine with it, you sit down. Are you willing to give first name and last name? Everybody good? For some kind of prize, you don't know what. I'll store it forever. I'll share it with a lot of third parties. Everybody's fine? Birth date. Still good? They did this in Holland a couple of weeks ago. Home address. Okay. Let's continue. Bank account information. Wow. Okay, so the Dutch went fast, but not that fast. All my online searches. All websites I ever visited. The names of everyone I ever communicate with, email, Skype, app chat, Snap, call, whatever.
They're okay with that?
No, I never said they were okay with that. But okay, so you're the last person standing, you also get a prize. Oh, Jim, oh, hold on, oh yes, you're from California, you're the American, of course. Names, phone numbers, and photos of everyone I know.
Well, you know why I missed it then? Yes, everybody knows the data already. It's already out.
Yeah, it's already out, true. Let me just finish it up. Where I am and where I've ever been, the content of all my communication with others at all times. So, We all work in the data field. We all want to collect the data, use the data, but we're not willing to share. That's incredible. Some Spanish ham for you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for supporting the Spanish economy. Yeah. Okay, let me get back to my presentation. Would you lie to your physician? Well, I do, from time to time. As you can see, I'm not very skinny, so there's one data variable that I never share, not even with my husband, he doesn't know about it. My weight. But I don't lie about things that are very, very important to me. And those are my kids. My husband's kids, so get it. Why? Because I'm very risk averse when it comes to things I actually care about, my children. They're important to me, and when I talk to my pediatrician, I say the truth, I don't lie. We speak the same language, we try to find the same vocabulary. And my question is, would you say the same about legal counsel of your company or your clients? First of all, who knows their legal counsel if you work for a big company? Is there a legal counsel? Yeah, well, I know you do, but okay. Which is kind of interesting, because certain people are specialized in this idea of what do we do with data. Privacy is clearly becoming more of a topic. But it's interesting to see that a lot of people working in analytics, digital analytics, don't even talk to legal counsel for a variety of reasons. But there are also companies and people who actually reach out, have lunches with legal counsel, just like we did 10 years ago, trying to reach out with IT because we needed their collaboration. The time has come today to start sitting together with the people who are responsible for data protection and privacy. Why has this time come? I've spoken a lot about this, and this is kind of a very short summary of it. We are at a time where data is becoming ubiquitous. I was thinking about Asimov's 3 rules of robotics when Jim was talking. And the 3 rules of robotics talks about harms. And that's about the second law I have here as well, is the problem we have currently with data is that legislation has a problem defining those harms. Those harms often happen in the long run, long term. But they are there and they're starting to pop up. This is one of the reasons why privacy is also popping up. One of the first things also about data is it's a new economic asset. We've never seen this before. Something that has value and that you can replicate without cost. We used to have a house. A house loses value. You can't just replicate your house. But here, it's data. Copy, paste, new database, sell it, things like that. This is something totally new, a new concept that the basis of legislation is not prepared for. And this is what we need to build in the future. So I talked a bit about harms. So how are we going to solve this issue today when it comes to privacy legislation? Companies are trying to be compliant. What is allowed by the law. And in order to do that, they want to minimize their risk, because often data sets are not just specific to one country. And what Hungary says is not the same thing as what Slovakia says, or the French, or the German, or the English. So as soon as you get companies who are cross-border, we have different types of legislation. So what companies are going to do is, should I care about Hungarian data protection? Well, apparently with the number of things that are popping up at the European Court of Justice from Hungary, it seems you should. And then to see, okay, should I care more about Hungary or should I more care about Slovakia, Greece, or things like that? So it's a risk exercise that you're trying to balance, because you're not going to do different exceptions for different countries. What you want is one setup in terms of analytics. And then what you want to do is then minimize that risk and make sure that you understand how your liability falls within the data ecosystem. There's the data subjects you're collecting data from. There are intermediaries, like agencies, tools, and things like that. And then there's the company that is actually collecting this on behalf of their clients and things like that. So it's a data ecosystem, and you need to understand how all this works. So as I said, I have a background in analytics, 10 years, more, I don't want to count anymore. It felt a bit like Age of Empires. You know, you kind of discover new data sets and you plug them together and things like that. Privacy is like a puffish. I know if you have kids, SpongeBob has this lady for the driver's license things, and she kind of gets very annoyed at SpongeBob. That's privacy. And you never know where it comes from, but it's there, and usually it's pretty slow. Legislation is slow, so it kind of bubbles up. So if somebody knocks on your door, for example, in the next coming months saying, hey, safe harbor, this is something that is going to happen. Safe harbor is about international data transfers between Europe and the United States. And it used to work, it doesn't work anymore, and nobody knows what's going to happen. So it's possible that somebody knocks on your door and says, do we actually use American tools? You might want to think about the answer you want to give. So there are similarities, but there are differences as well between analytics and privacy. The thing is, as privacy is becoming more important, as we're kind of fighting with data quality and ad blockers and things like that, and creepy data, CEOs are asking also legal counsel to get involved. They're saying, hey, there's this privacy data thing, and then there's this big data team, and you guys should talk. And there's data breaches, and I like this data thing, but I'm worried. I don't really sleep well at night, so can you guys just sit together around the table? Because the fact remains that if something goes wrong, usually somebody gets fired. And it didn't really relate to legal counsel up until now, because legal counsel was in 2 contracts. I'm a fitness club and I buy property, real estate. They were into other kinds of legal stuff. There's not a lot of legal counsel inside companies that are actually specialized in privacy. But their heads might roll if something goes wrong. So it might be interesting to get them around the table as well and say, hey, I'm going to put data source A plus data source B plus data source C. I'm going to change all this and then sell it to another company. So Jim mentioned Axiom earlier on. And it's true, Axiom has a lot of data. And they're working very hard on making a lot of money with the data. They also have excellent privacy lawyers, and they really know what they're doing. The same cannot be said for a lot of other companies. So start thinking about, if I do something with my data, is there a problem? Would I feel uncomfortable with what I'm doing? Would I do that to my children? Is this ethical? Just a question. And then it's also possible that you can't talk to anybody about this. This is what is starting to bubble up, is some kind of accountability related to the data you're using, so that you can knock on somebody's door if you feel uncomfortable with a new idea that you have, or somebody needs to sign it off. So there are 2 fundamental questions popping up when it comes to data privacy. How far is too far? And that would probably be subjective. There's a part that is legal, but there's a part that is certainly subjective as well. If, for example, BuzzFeed asks me if in my family there's diabetes, and I answer yes, is that sensitive data? Should they collect this data about me? Should they ask for consent? Or is it up to me to decide if I answer the question or leave the website? These are the kinds of things that we're today dealing with because BuzzFeed can create a segment in Google Analytics to say she answered yes or no to question 2346. So even though Google Analytics says no personal data, it used to be PII, now it's no personal data, it's still a question that's worth asking. If in a poll I ask something and I pick up that variable, even though I totally de-identify this, whatever, isn't there something that could go wrong at some point? And if this is the case, who decides what is acceptable? Should there be some kind of ethical discussions or at least some kind of escalation procedure within companies to say, I'm okay, I'm not okay, because there might be a risk? This is things that are starting to build up. Now, up until now, I've been doing this for 3.5 years, listening to the lawyers, listening to the analysts, listening to the security people. And what happened is, the first thing was always the same thing. We don't collect PII, personally identifiable information, which used to be the terms and conditions of Google Analytics as well. Yeah, okay. So PII are variables defined by American states. So each state is a bit different. And Europe talks about personal information, which could be one variable, but different variables as well. So you don't collect personal data. How do you know that? How are you sure you don't collect personal information? How do you know you're not identifying individuals? And certainly when we're doing cross-device tracking, and we're starting to merge CRM data, aren't we getting really close to identifying individuals? Another one I usually get is, American tools, international data transfers, safe harbor. So last night, European Justice Commissioner had a press conference about it because this framework was declared illegal by the European Court of Justice in October. Does anybody know a guy called Max Schrems? No. So Max Schrems is an Austrian law student who started a legal proceeding against Facebook 2 years ago to say Facebook does not comply with European legislation. The right to privacy as a European citizen is not respected because of surveillance. So Snowden, basically. So the Austrians said, this is not us, this is Ireland. And then Ireland was like, no idea. Supreme Court of Ireland. Supreme Court of Ireland said, no idea. European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, who said, yeah, okay. Snowden, okay. Privacy rights in Europe, okay. Well, illegal. So you can't use safe harbor to do international data transfers. Any software as a service solution that has no data centers in Europe is illegal. Somebody might knock on your door. So that's the risk. It's growing. There is like a legal no man's land. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And we were speculating with Renee yesterday about which country is not going to only bark, but also bite. I have no idea, but I'd be careful. So what do you do? Because we live in the global world. And what I get a lot also is, oh my God, it's, legislation is so bloody complicated. What do I do? There are 6 frameworks out there related to privacy. Pick the one you prefer. I don't care. So, generally accepted privacy principles by the American accountants, OECD guidelines, revised after 33 years, fair information practice principles by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission in the US, the European directive now replaced by the European Commission, ISO 27000 family, and even the Asians, the APEC, have their own. Pick one, all the principles are almost the same. Just pick one and have a discussion about transparency, about choice, about information review and correction. I suppose you all heard about the right to be forgotten. And as Jim said, erasing my data is going to be bloody complicated if we are not careful. How do I protect my information, and who is going to be accountable? 5 things you need to start thinking about. Maybe not you, maybe a team of people, maybe data governance, maybe security, but this discussion needs to happen because we're sitting on tons of data, which indeed is cheaper to keep and to store than possibly to delete, but is also more risky as it's just sitting there, and data breaches are becoming a reality more and more today. So what I also get as a question very often is, okay, related to this PII, as I said before, personal information, there is no list of it, but you can start with that. You can start by saying, this is what I'm going to avoid. I don't want to do this. I'm going to replace this by some kinds of IDs and things like that. When it comes to sensitive data, financial, health information, biometric information, and things like that, it's interesting to note that the variables are very controversial. Legislation in the United States opposes each other. It's not clear what it is. So let me give you a hint. There is an important analytics vendor out there that says you're not allowed to collect sensitive data. The problem is, what is sensitive data? It's not clear. So be careful with that, with the data you're going to use and collect and things like that. Let me just pass this on. So where do you start? The first thing is understand who you are within the ecosystem. Who are you? Between the data subjects, the company that's collecting the data, or something in between called the processor, the tools, the vendors, and things like that. I'm finishing a white paper about the subject with AT Internet that should come out, because the French are very specific on this idea of what does the ecosystem look like. So it's an interesting discussion to follow as well. Step 1, who are you? Step 2 is document your data flows. This is not just about digital analytics. It's about integrating different types of tools. And so you need to understand how these tools work together. Step 2 is about aligning your liabilities. What are you allowed to do? What aren't you allowed to do? Who is accessing this data and things like that? As I said, the French are pretty good at that. Thank you. That's where my voice goes. And most and for all, when it comes to certain types of data, there's one basis of legislation that's called purpose and consent. The reason why you're collecting the data and the fact that people are okay with the fact that you're collecting the data. Of course, the discussion is that data personal, yes or no? But the problem is often we lose this. We lose this idea that somebody agreed for you to use this data and they could opt out if they suddenly changed their minds. An example of this is emailing. I don't know how many of you remember, but in the first email tools, there were no unsubscribe buttons. It took a while for the industry to actually understand what was possible. So my question today is, what happens if I upload an email list onto Google to do retargeting? Where can I opt out? It doesn't exist. So it's all very nice and well, but if I give my data to you in a newsletter, I opt out, but you update my data, you upload my data onto Google to retarget me, you lose this notion of purpose and consent. That's where vendors and tools also have a role to play today. And then understand your risk. What are my fines? What are potential class actions? What is going to happen? This is where you clearly need understanding of the privacy ecosystem and the political system that works behind it. A last one that's interesting as well is that class actions by consumers is something that will probably be possible in Europe in the near future. So we used to talk about fines by data protection agencies in different countries, Spain and the UK being the highest, €500,000. Now with the new general data protection regulation that got voted last year, we're going up to 4% of global turnover and a maximum of €20 million. So certain countries used to be 3,500. Would you care? No. Up to €20 million? Is somebody going to get fired? Possibly. So be careful about that. Things are changing and you need to understand what is changing exactly. And one very, very important component of the new legislation that got voted at the end of last year is documentation. So we all know when we look at series about trials that somebody is innocent until proven guilty. This is the reverse. If you are collecting the data of data subjects or processing or doing like that, you have to prove you're doing it right, not the other way around. So document, train, make sure that your company doesn't end up like Volkswagen when it came to emissions. So one last point I wanted to share with you guys. Maybe some of you remember the cookie directive. This internal discussion about consent and do we need to agree, click yes, click no on those cookie walls, and the banners that we have everywhere now relate to using data and data collection. Well, it's getting back, and we're going to talk about this together with P-Week on the 11th of February. Talking about the new general data protection regulation that's coming, how things are changing. So if you thought the cookie directive discussion and walls and horrible things was a nightmare, listen to that one. It's a free webinar. If you have colleagues and you identify privacy counsel or whoever are the lawyers within your companies, you can always direct them to also our IAPP webinar we're doing with Jim together. The IAPP being the International Association of Privacy Professionals, where we'll be talking together with the privacy and the lawyers to explain what you need to know and things like that. So 2 ways to go, either from an analytics perspective, discuss what's happening and things like that, what you need to know, or the legal side in order to make sure that we build the bridges between the 2 different worlds. So that was it for me. Thanks for listening, and thank you for supporting the Spanish economy.